We are back with another gear output today. We are looking at the Osight series of optics, and we have not put these on a gun. We've not shot these. This is a bit of an unboxing. I mean, we've unboxed these. We've looked at them. But you know, without a lot of field experience, we're going to give you some thoughts on these new optics. To be clear, these guys reached out to us and sent us these optics. And I'll just add before we jump into that Osight is the same company that runs Olight, and that Olight, Osight, whatever, they are very proactive about working with influencer types like us. They're pretty proactive, and so we see them on a lot of YouTube channels and things like that. But we don't see a lot of professional applications yet. We don't see a lot of people out there who are really putting these through the ringer on the duty side, and so they don't tend to have as much of a track record, and that sometimes leads to them maybe being perceived as less credible. Yeah,
I mean, obviously they've been making flashlights for a long time, and I've got some mixed feelings on some of their lights and things, and that's neither here nor there. We're going to look at these Osight optics with fresh eyes. Not having any experience with them, just kind of what are our first impressions, what do we think about them, obviously not putting time on them yet, shooting them and running them through those paces and seeing how they hold up in the real world mounted on a gun. But just kind of first impressions of, hey, what do we think about them? What's the feel like, the quality that we can ascertain from just looking them over?
Well said.
So, first things first. I don't know if you want to jump right into it.
Yeah, they got two models. Let's kind of talk about that.
Yeah, we have the Osight X, which is kind of your large optic, full size optic, and it is full size. We'll talk about that. This has got basically your typical RMR footprint. I say typical, it seems like at least some companies are standardizing more to that RMR footprint size. So that's nice. It's going to be compatible with a lot of guns, even right from the factory. And then we have the Osight S, which is really the Shield RMSc is what's been around for a long time. So it's technically the RMSc footprint, but more and more people are calling it like the K footprint because of the Holosun 407, 507K models. So little guy, big guy.
Yeah,
little guy, big guy.
It's worth noting that at least the S model, they seem to have like a olive green version for sale on their website. So I think they have basically, as far as I can tell, they have 3 SKUs. They have big guy, and then little guy in olive green.
In my favorite color.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's the little guy though, not the big guy. Okay. So first things first, and we'll try and get some B-roll on the camera for you. The packaging is quite impressive. It feels like you're unwrapping a $1,000 iPhone when you open these things up.
It really does, and you'll see why. Folds open here, and you have everything's compartmentalized. Really, really well thought out. Tells you what's in each of these compartments.
Boxes, yeah.
And I mean, even this little kind of message here. Thank you for being part of the Osight family. Your support is the reason we are here. Enjoy, Osight team. That's kind of just a nice little note. And you pull that out, and here's the actual product. So the presentation of how things are packaged and put together that way is really impressive. I've never seen any really firearm product, period, that comes like this.
Yeah, it does. It definitely breaks the mold in terms of like the presentation. I agree. And taking it a step further, something that really kind of blew both our minds a minute ago is when you pulled out the screw box, the box that is labeled screws. We'll pull that sucker out. This is fantastic. I mean, quite impressive.
Yes, I saw this one thing, and I haven't even pulled everything out yet, but I saw this and was really quite blown away. This is a screw set.
It's like a pill box, but for screws.
Right. And we have number 6, 32, 440, 640, and M3 screws here. So kind of different threads and pitches, and then different lengths. So this has got multiple different lengths for each of these as well, and you'll see they're kind of staggered in there. The taller ones on this side, the shorter ones on this side of those different screw pitches. And there's even a little guide card. Was that this?
It's somewhere in here.
There's a card that lists the different screws and which ones are compatible or that you need to use. There it is right here. In fact, this has got 2 sides, Osight X compatibility, Osight S compatibility. It's not only telling you like which optic, like, okay, these are gun models that are going to work with the Osight S, because, you know, a lot of these, like a P365 and a Glock 43X and so on and so forth, come with that 40 or that K series footprint. And so, and then it'll tell you for that specific gun with this optic, you're going to want to use the M3 by 10.5 millimeter screw to mount it to that gun. Really, really nicely presented and communicated to make this hopefully foolproof, because this is one of the challenging things with gun owners and guns and now optics and trying to put everything together and mount things properly. It can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes, and so they're really making it quite easy. They've got a very comprehensive set of screws with instructions with basically a key telling you this is what goes to what. So
yeah. There's a QR code on there, so you can scan it, presumably get some sort of instructional video.
Yep.
So that's impressive. The packaging, the presentation is impressive. How everything's kind of compartmentalized. You got a box in here that's got your USB-C charging cable. We're going to talk about that at length. You have in here kind of a little optic tool. Let's see what this box is.
Yeah, again, we haven't even looked at everything.
Yeah, it's like some
this
sort
is
of
just
case.
a little pouch, I guess. Probably
for the charger.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the charger. So I know we're not even talking about the optic yet, but let's just talk about the accessories and different things here, and we'll get to the goods here in a moment. So this one here, again, tells you it's got looks like a charging cable, looks like a lanyard, and then a tool. Which is a nice touch as well. Using my knife because I have a hard time pulling these open without tearing them. Yeah, so there's our lanyard. Here's a tool, and it looks like it's got a Torx end here compatible with the screws.
Is that plastic or metal?
It's plastic polymer for the body, of course metal tips for the tools. By the way, don't use this for installing an optic on a live firearm, meaning a gun that's going to be fired, because you're not going to be able to get the proper torque values necessary for proper installation. These are handy though sometimes to just get the screws started, or to loosen screws if you got to pull it off for any reason. And then this side of the tool is basically a flathead screwdriver sort of thing that's going to be what you would want to use for making the adjustments for windage and elevation. So nice little touch there to get the tool as well. And then again, here's our charging cable, because this is an optic that's rechargeable.
Yes.
Which is probably the big innovation that they are presenting and bringing to the table here, because, I mean, there are a couple of other options out there. Mostly of those are like solar charging, or they have a small battery inside them, and again, that battery is topped off with solar power. This does not have a solar panel or anything on it.
Nothing solar.
It just is an optic with an internal battery that is rechargeable. So then the question is, well, how is it recharged?
Well, and I think before we get into that too, some people are going to see that as a huge negative. We're going to have people in the community who are like, I mean, this is the last thing I want. I want an optic I can pop the battery out of and put in a brand new battery anytime I want, on demand, as desired. And I think that could be debated both ways. I admit that when this was first announced, I didn't have one in hand, I was kind of anti the rechargeable idea. My head was like, yeah, I think I'd prefer to run on a battery. As time goes by, the more I think about it, the more I think, maybe it's not so bad. And you sort of wonder sometimes, like, am I going to be embarrassed 10 years from now when all of the optics are rechargeable and I'm the guy who's on record as being like, oh, give me the battery operated deal, because that's, a little bit of hesitation toward new technology is natural. And I think the jury's still out on this idea of a rechargeable optic. I mean, one downside is, the lifespan of this battery. At some point it will degrade and it will stop working as well, and we won't be able to replace it. We'll have to replace the entire optic.
Without sending it in, for service from the company.
And I highly doubt that they lifetime warranty the battery in here.
Right.
So that's probably like my number one concern, is the idea that, a traditional optic, like the one I got on right now, that has a battery in it. The battery dies, you put in a new battery, and that should have no real impact on its lifespan, its life value. Yeah,
and that's a great point, that the internal battery is only good for so long, and how long is that? We don't know, and I don't know if anybody truly knows, because it's not a product that's been out long enough. I was actually just taking a quick look here to see if it says anything about the expected length of time that these optics should last on a single charge.
That's a good question.
That's probably my initial. Wasn't even necessarily thinking about the longevity of the battery life as far as like how many times can it be recharged and so forth. I mean, in today's world, most times rechargeable batteries can be recharged 300 to 700
300
times.
800, yeah, depending. But you start to get degradation in there too.
Absolutely.
So maybe you get 300 full charges.
Again, the question is like, well, is this something that I have to like put my charger on once a week, once a month, once every 6 months, once a year? Like how often
Time
we
will
have to
tell.
do that?
Yeah.
And we don't really know. And I'm not seeing anything that's noted, at least at a glance, in the instructions here.
To give you some context, though, to answer your question about how it recharges, the optic itself is not plugging into a cable. So I'm not taking this and plugging it into like a USB-C. Instead, it has this recharging, I'll call it hood. So you're taking the hood, and it is getting recharged. So it has a USB-C port on the back. You plug it in, and it kind of has an indicator of how fully charged it is. So our warehouse guy charged these up, as it were, so I know they're fully charged. And then you put the hood over the optic, and it kind of connects via, it's magnetic, so I can feel it kind of snap in there. And then it's showing me now that the hood is recharging the optic, and it's showing me how charged the optic is. In this case, it's fully charged.
Right, yep. As is this one. And you'll see there's 3 copper contacts on the top side, underneath side of the charger, and that's going to mate up with this metal surfaces on the top of the optic. And the magnetic piece of that is foolproof. I mean, it's going to go on only one way. And it's really cool to see that all light up and give you a status indicator of this is where you're at with the optic.
Yeah. There's a little button that you can push to get the status indicator again. So if it's been sitting there and charging for a while, and like I want to check on it, see how charged it is, you could push that button and get that sense of that. I like this system because I could, I'm just thinking about how I would use this. I could at night, take my gun out of the holster rig out of my pants, take the hood, stick it on the optic, and put the whole rig in the safe. Not have to worry about a cable or power or electricity inside the safe itself.
Right. The idea here is, and I'm sure there's some people out there that would make this assumption. I know because I had somebody in a Facebook discussion once say something about, well, I don't understand these optics because you'd have to draw the gun, then turn it on, before you could shoot the bad guy kind of thing. It's like, no. You leave the optic on all the time. I'm sure somebody out there might assume that the idea is that I'm carrying this around with my charger on it.
No.
That's not how I view this being used either, that you have to remove this before you can use your gun. This is just, I think, a convenient way of recharging the optic battery. And I think what you just suggested, and I could, by the way, I think this is why, one of the reasons why the lanyard may very well exist is that this could be, this attaches through a little loop on the charger. This could be in your safe, okay? So you put your gun away in the safe, lanyard is attached to the charger, lanyard is attached to something inside the safe, and as grab gun, it's gonna just pull this off.
Interesting.
So you don't even have to think about taking this off.
Yeah,
and so in that way, you're keeping the optic topped off, so it's not going to be ever dead, in theory. And you just grab and go, and this pulls off, and you have a working optic.
Yeah. Another thing that appeals to me, as I'm warming up to this idea of a rechargeable optic, is like the optic that I have on me right now. That's in my pants here. I have no idea where it's at in its battery cycle.
Yep.
I mean, I'll maybe start to get a little bit of indication as it starts to dim a little bit and it's not as bright, and I'm trying to turn it up and I just can't get it as bright as I used to. Like, okay, this battery's starting to die. It's probably about time to replace it. But with this, I have an immediate idea. So I could come home at night, pull a gun, put the hood on, be like, I got a 50% charge. And maybe I choose to not recharge it that night. I'm like, I don't need to put the hood on. It's still got a 50% charge, and so I'm good. So just having some sort of feedback loop of what my current charge level is, that's nice.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, I mean, it comes down to how reliable are the electronics inside this as far as that battery working, always being able to power the unit, being able to be recharged. Is something going to keep that process from being able to happen reliably and consistently? Don't know. It's just going to be something that comes from testing and getting thousands of these out there being tested.
And they're getting bashed around a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered that all pretty well. It's an interesting concept. I don't necessarily have an issue with the rechargeable nature because, again, there are some other products out there. I've got pistols like the SCS optic from Holosun has got an internal battery and a solar little panel on it, and there's no way to actually recharge that except for the sun. You know, they talk about how it doesn't take very much light for that thing to actually get recharged, and I have yet to have an issue with those SCS optics. So that seems to work pretty well. This is not that approach as far as being solar powered, but I think that, you know, there's examples out there on the market that suggest, hey, a rechargeable internal battery is a thing and seems to work okay, at least so far.
Well, yeah, I mean, a couple other quick thoughts and we'll move on, but one is that we don't have to worry about how to access the battery.
Right.
So we have optics that we're concerned about because, you know, we'd have to unmount the optic in order to get to the battery. Well, there's no battery to get to. There's no drawer, there's no screw, there's no failure point for battery access.
Yes.
So I think that's interesting.
This is a mount to your gun and forget it as far as should never have to pull it off.
No, not for that kind of servicing.
Exactly.
So I think that's appreciated. And while we have no idea how long a charge lasts, I think it's worth noting that on a traditional, you know, little watch battery on a traditional optic, those batteries tend to last a long freaking time. So I think that the assumption would be that this charge would last a bit.
I mean, I have optics that I replace the batteries on once per year.
Yeah, easily,
you know,
sure.
And so we'll see. I mean, the thing to do would be to use one of these on a carry gun every single day and let it go for a week and then check its charge, and then go for 2 weeks or a month and check charge and let it go for, you know, just see kind of, so you get a sense of what to expect. So you kind of know how often do I need to stick the charger on, kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll have to do some testing.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so with that kind of concept discussed to the best of our perception of it, let's talk about the optics themselves.
Talk about the optics, exactly. Yeah. So again, we have the K footprint or RMSc footprint in the form of the Osight S, and we have the larger RMR footprint Osight X. I'll go ahead and start with this guy. This is, you know, again, full-size optic. My first impression upon seeing it, I kind of actually chuckled. I don't know if you recall, but I was like, huh, look how like tall it is. It's notably,
it's a big window.
It is a big window, and in some cases that's a good thing. You're like, oh, a big window. I mean, in all honesty, like if I could just wear some kind of display and glasses, like a heads-up display that I had all the time that was mated up with my gun, and like wherever I looked, a reticle appeared, like some kind of video game thing. Like just think about it. Like the bigger window you have, like that's a really awesome thing to have.
Sure.
So I like a big window. I also like big dots. Anyway, so this is cool that as far as that's concerned, but the downside of having this really tall, large windowed optic is if you want to put this on a full-size gun that you know, some of us carry full-size guns, it might not be your friend from a concealment perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be harder to conceal.
Because this
more
optic may be so big that it may, like I generally kind of like with a quality holster, optic on a gun is not usually a huge knock for concealability, but when it gets big or kind of boxy shape, that can be a knock in terms of concealment. So that's probably the first thing right off the bat I noticed about the Osight X.
Well, let's compare it, because you also noticed the footprint. You're like, hey, that looks very similar to a...
Yeah, well, so let's start with, I'll pull out two popular options here. These are very similarly sized, but one's a little bit more square and probably mimics the shape of this guy here. This is the Holosun 508T, and it's very similar width-wise and has kind of this square shape and a little bit of a square window. And then the 507C, which is more rounded, same footprint. And you can just kind of get a sense of when I say like this thing is tall, like you really see when you put those next to it, it's tall. This is a large optic and a large
more
window.
Boxy. Yeah. And they have to have, to some degree, I imagine, some flat-ish surface to work with the recharger hood thingy.
Yeah, right.
Making that rounded would make it more difficult, or maybe not. Maybe it's just then this has to be rounded. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, my initial kind of thought there.
I don't necessarily have an issue with the shape. It's just it's tall. Although rounded shapes like a 507C or 407C tend to conceal a little bit better because you don't get like real obvious points underneath the shirt.
Yeah.
So that's worth noting. Now, the one optic that really came to mind first, and I didn't have one available, you know, not mounted to a gun. I guess I could, you know, quickly, you know, do this, make it a little bit easier.
It is barrel blocked. in case anyone's losing their mind.
But the 507 comp from Holosun and the Osight X are actually almost identical in terms of height. The comp is a little bit wider, and that window is a little bit wider, but they look very similar, you know, size-wise when we're looking at the height, and even like the window, internal window size vertically is very, very similar. So to me, this when I first saw this, I'm thinking more of a competition-oriented optic,
probably not a concealed carry, but maybe
carry.
I mean, and we're probably not going to see a ton of them on duty guns, but you know, maybe more duty-esque or competition-esque. Yeah.
And to that point, like looking at the construction of both of these optics, you know, I would say they're pretty on par with today's standards. Like it's obviously an aluminum-bodied optic. It looks like it has enough material. Like none of these are going to really.
It looks pretty robust.
It looks, yes. None of these are going to be something I recommend you drop on concrete every day. They're probably not going to handle that super well. But can it take a few bumps and bruises and things, you know, throughout carrying it on a daily basis or running on a competition circuit? It seems like it's probably robust enough for that.
It has the appearance of being able to do that. Yeah. All right. So let's look at the Olight S. S is for small. I tell you, I'm not a guy with a very good memory for detail, so these different optic companies often will throw me. It took me a solid year to remember that on Holosun's, K is the smaller footprint, and that C is the full, because I think C compact. But anyway, S is for small. That's how I'm doing it in my brain. So this is interesting. Now, this is a little bit of a different option, too, because this is more of a closed
it's an enclosed optic.
Yeah, it's an enclosed optic.
Yeah.
So, you know, it
has a front window and a back window.
Correct. And otherwise, though, it looks to be similar on par with the size of some comparable products.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a 407K right here. I wish I had an EPS Carry handy, because the EPS Carry is essentially your 407K that's got the enclosed emitter like this one does. And those would be like a really great comparison. But I suspect, I mean, these look about the same height.
Yes.
They're about the same width. Window size, you know, seems, I've got a friend here. Actually, the window's a little bit more generous in the Osight, but that comes at the sacrifice of there's a little bit more material removed. In other words, the window frame on this is not quite as thick as what you get on the Holosun product.
Yeah, for sure. But otherwise, you know, in many respects, comparable. Let's talk briefly about price, because we did some looking up on these. To be clear, Osights are made in China, but Holosuns are as well, and we see other companies out there. Yeah, so it's not out of the world for us to see quality products coming from there. But in terms of price, the Osight X was $229.
Yeah.
For the black one,
which is
they only have black.
Really good.
Yeah,
I think.
Pretty impressive. The Osight S, $249 for the black, and then some additional incremental thing if you want the olive green. And
it seems counterintuitive that the bigger optic is the cheaper of the two in this case, but this is the enclosed optic, and generally we see enclosed emitter optics from any of the major players are a little bit more costly.
More of a premium.
And so that's probably the reason why that's a bit more spendy on the smaller optic. But they're still, I mean, we're talking a $20 price difference between these two. So that's pretty minimal.
Something that's noteworthy, though, as we're talking about price, is these Osights are multi-reticle. So I'm not one who cares that much about multi-reticle. I'm perfectly happy to just have a dot. But for those of you who are into the multi-reticle, you know, we're up till now we've been really looking at the 400 series of Holosuns. Well, not all of these. That's 5 of us. But you know,
these are multi-reticle over here.
Yeah, but this is a 407K.
Yes,
so
this one's not.
So if we think of it that way, I mean, they're really more. If we consider that factor, they're more competing with the 500 series of Holosuns. And in that context, they are cheaper.
They're cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these Osights are definitely very, very strongly competitively priced, I would say, for what it appears you're getting. So again, this just is going to come down to how strong, how durable, what's the longevity like how well are these actually going to perform. Especially, like, I mean, this right here is something people are going to put on a carry gun.
Sure.
How's that going to handle up to being carried every day, day in and day out for many, many hours? Occasionally, you know, I bump into things. I haven't broken anything yet, and I don't necessarily worry about that, but how's it going to handle, you know, the rigors of everyday carry? I'm not going to speak to duty use.
No, but track record matters, and I think that's one of the main takeaways for us is when we look at product. You know, at least what I'm trying to think when I look at things is, you know, there's what we can tell by looking at it. There's what we can tell by using it. But we have to remember, I am not a heavy user of these products. You know, I'm not on duty. I'm not in the military. I'm just not a heavy user. I think about this. You know, we did a video a little while ago. We were comparing a Surefire light to some Streamlights, and you know, those are brands that both have a track record, right? And so we look at these. It's like Holosuns are developing a track record. That's what we have here.
I'd say they're pretty well established in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. We don't see them a lot on duty guns. But they are definitely establishing a track record.
The 508Ts and 509Ts are, you know, fairly common.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, think about compare Aimpoint or Trigicon. Those guys have extremely established records of reliability and robustness.
Yep, totally.
Right now we're looking at these Osights, and we just lack a track record.
Yep.
And I'm not the guy who's going to say, well, I carried it for 6 months, and so for me it has a track record. I'm more reliant on what the industry says as a whole from people who are professionals who have really vetted them out at scale. And that we just don't have that yet that we know of for these Osights.
I haven't seen any. I personally have not seen. I'm not saying they don't exist. I haven't gone searching for it. And I really wanted to offer my first impressions, truthfully, honestly, as I see it, you know, in our brief little unboxing today. But I haven't seen any reviews or read anything at all about these, or talked to anybody that I trust about them that has experience with them. So yeah, I mean, this is just a very untested product in that regard, and I think that you're exactly right with that. So I think it's something that I think our intent is to, you know, test these somewhat and to see how they hold up. Yeah. And you know, and we can always come back to you and say, hey, this is how they did with such and such test and so many rounds fired or whatever.
Yeah. So time will tell. But all around, I'm impressed. Yeah. I'm legitimately impressed, and I'm warming up definitely to the idea, the advantages that come with the rechargeable optic. I'm very impressed with the presentation, with the packaging, with the materials, with how many screws you're getting in different sizes, and just the simple thing is the compatibility card. Very
well thought out, designed product. I think all across the board, very professionally presented. So hopefully that bears out in the quality of the product itself. Because, you know, I mean, you could argue that a company might be inclined to make things look really presentable to cover something up. I'm not saying that's the case here at all, but
who knows?
But overall, it looks like a impressively presented product. One thing we didn't mention, I think, before we kind of wrap things up, is they are adjustable brightness. They have just a simple plus minus up down button on the side, which I think is great. And it appears that I haven't, again, this is how little I know about these, but some of these optics have these little spots on the front of them. It's oftentimes a kind of ambient brightness sensor. It looks to me like these may have an auto brightness setting, and so that's something I'll have to explore a little bit further. I'm not super big on auto brightness setting, but some people, you know, think that's a cool thing.
Well, some of the Holosuns, like the little solar panel, that's what it's for, really, is also detect ambient light and adjust the brightness.
Mode and brightness memory function. Yeah, it's got an auto sensing mode, and you can turn it off. So
that's nice.
So yeah, exactly. So that's I like that because I would turn it off, but some people again would like that feature. And then it also has motion sensors, so which I kind of expect that. I think that's becoming more the expectation from a lot of these manufacturers now, is that they go to sleep after some amount of time of inactivity. But as soon as you move it and touch it, it's going to wake back up.
What some brands would call shake awake.
Yep,
exactly. is what we see here. Yeah. So there's a first glance, a relatively in-depth, but first unboxing kind of glance at the Osight S and the Osight X. Thanks, everyone.